Healing isn't a straight line, it's messy and it takes time. But if you keep moving forward, you'll find that you're stronger than you ever imagined. Thank you for being with me on this journey. Remember, you're never alone. And so, to all of you listening, what lessons have you learned from your own stories of heartbreak? Share in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of love, loss, and everything in between. Together, we heal. I walked into the room and saw my father, entangled with my husband, their bodies moving in ways I could hardly process. My husband was moaning with pleasure, while my father looked intensely into his eyes. I froze. My heart raced as I slowly pushed the door open, not knowing what I would find next. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel Infidelity Story. Today, I'm finally ready to share one of the darkest moments of my life. My name is Louise, I'm 28 years old, and I teach literature at a public school here in New York. I've always had a deep love for stories. They transport me to places I could never imagine. It's this passion I try to share with my students every day. My husband, Peter, is a civil engineer, 35 years old, and the love of my life, or so I thought. We've been together for 5 years, and he's always been everything I could ever ask for: attentive, hardworking, and caring. We met at a mutual friend's party, and from that moment, I knew he was the one. Our life together has been peaceful, full of shared dinners, movie nights, and trips to new places. We live in an apartment downtown, close to his office and relatively close to my school. We had what I believed was a perfect life. My relationship with my father, Charles, has always been strong. He's 55, a well-respected cardiologist, and ever since my mother passed away a few years ago, he's been more present in my life than ever before. Dad is a charming man with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He's always been my rock, my confidant, and my advisor. But in the past few months, something started to shift between him and Peter. It began with small things, subtle glances, quiet conversations that stopped the moment I walked into the room. At first, I was happy they were becoming closer. I had always wished for Peter and my dad to get along, especially after my mum's death. But soon, there was a tension I couldn't explain. They exchanged more messages than I expected, and Peter seemed more excited to meet up with my dad than with me. One night, Peter suggested we have my dad over for dinner. He was unusually insistent, but I agreed, wanting to bring some warmth back into our lives. I cooked their favourite dishes, hoping for a cosy evening. As Peter got ready, I noticed he was extra cheerful, even singing while taking a shower. When I walked past the bathroom, I was surprised to see Peter waxing his behind. He had never done that before, and it felt strange. I shook it off, deciding it wasn't worth overthinking. When my dad arrived, Peter welcomed him with a warm embrace. The night went smoothly at first. We laughed, shared stories, but soon I felt left out. Peter and my dad were engrossed in conversation, leaning close to one another, and I couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling settling over me. After dinner, while I was washing the dishes, I heard them laughing from the living room. I walked in and found them sitting too close on the couch, my dad's hand resting on Peter's leg. It was a simple touch, but it made my stomach turn. I pretended I needed something from the room to break the moment. They quickly pulled apart and an awkward silence followed. That night, for the first time ever, Peter turned away from me in bed. He couldn't perform, something that had never happened before, and when I questioned him, he blamed work stress. But I had seen him full of energy just moments earlier, especially when he was with my dad. My mind raced with suspicions, but I couldn't bear to face them. The following day, I decided to leave work early, hoping to surprise Peter and spend some quality time together. As I entered our apartment, I heard voices coming from the bedroom. My heart pounded as I quietly walked down the hallway. I heard my father's voice. He was in the bedroom with Peter. I carefully pushed the door ajar and peeked inside. They were sitting on the bed, my dad's hand gently caressing Peter's arm, too close, too intimate. I quickly stepped back, overwhelmed with confusion and anger. What was happening between them? I made some noise as I entered the kitchen, and moments later, they both came downstairs, laughing as if nothing had happened. I couldn't bring myself to confront them, not yet, but the doubt and pain were growing inside me like a poison, consuming me. That night, after another tense, silent dinner, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat down next to Peter on the couch, my hands trembling, and asked him about his relationship with my dad. His response was vague, filled with excuses about how they were just getting along, but his avoidance of eye contact told me everything I needed to know. The distance between them had only grown more suspicious. Days passed, and I tried to ignore the tension, but it became unbearable. Then, one afternoon while cleaning our room, Peter's phone buzzed with a new message. I glanced at it, and my heart stopped. It was from my father. "You handled everything so well. That was incredible." My entire world shattered. The walls closed in around me as I held Peter's phone in my hand, trying to make sense of what I had just read. When Peter came out of the shower, I showed him the message. He went pale, his eyes filled with panic. He couldn't deny it any longer. The truth spilled out like a flood, drowning me in every word. Peter confessed that he had always struggled with his feelings for men, but had repressed them his whole life. When my dad began to spend more time with him, Peter found in him something he had never experienced before, a deep connection, a bond that quickly turned into something physical. My father had comforted him in ways I couldn't. Tears streamed down my face as Peter explained everything. I felt betrayed, not just by him, but by my father, the man who had always taught me about loyalty and respect. I confronted my dad the next day. He wept on the phone, apologizing over and over, but his words did nothing to heal the damage. I told him I forgave him, but I couldn't bear to see him again. I needed space, I needed to heal. When Peter packed his things and left our home, I watched him go with a mix of sadness and relief. Our home, once filled with love and laughter, now felt empty and cold. But deep down, I knew this was a chance to start over, to find myself again. It's been months since that day. I've started to rebuild my life, focusing on self-love and rediscovering who I am outside of the relationships that defined me. My father has reached out, but I haven't responded. I'm not ready, and I don't know if I'll ever be. So, what would you do in my situation? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like the video. Thank you for listening to my story. Until next time. As the weeks passed, I found myself grappling with the reality of what had happened. My routine at work became my only solace. Teaching literature, something I had always found joy in, was now my escape. The stories I read with my students took on new meaning, tales of betrayal, heartbreak, and redemption, echoed the turmoil within me. I couldn't help but see myself in the tragic heroines I once admired, wondering how I could have missed the signs of my own life's plot twist. Peter was gone, and the space he left behind was suffocating. I spent sleepless nights replaying the events over and over in my mind. How had I been so blind? How had the people I trusted most conspired behind my back? I wanted to hate them both, but the love I had for my father, for Peter, still lingered like a ghost in the room, refusing to leave. One afternoon I received an unexpected phone call. It was my father. For a moment, I hesitated to answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Louise," he said softly, his voice strained with guilt. "Can we please talk, face to face? I owe you that." I didn't respond immediately. The thought of seeing him again made my stomach churn, but at the same time, I felt a strange pull toward closure. I agreed to meet him the next day at a small cafe we used to frequent when I was younger. When I arrived, my father was already seated at a table near the window. He looked older, more fragile than I remembered. His once confident posture now seemed hunched, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights and regret. As I approached, he stood up nervously, unsure of how to greet me. I sat down without a word, waiting for him to speak. "Louise," he began, his voice trembling. "I don't know where to start. I've thought about this conversation every day since you found out. I can't justify what I did and I won't try to. I just want you to understand that I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted to betray you like this." The cafe felt too quiet, too intimate for this kind of confession. I could hear the clinking of cups and distant murmurs of other patrons, but the air between us was thick with tension. "I don't understand, Dad," I said, my voice cracking. "You, of all people. How could you? How could you betray me like this? I've lost my husband, but losing you, that's something I don't know how to process." He lowered his gaze, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I was lonely, Louise. After your mother passed, I didn't know how to cope. Peter was there, and we connected in a way that I hadn't felt in so long. It was wrong, and I see that now, but at the time, I convinced myself that it wasn't about betraying you. I wasn't thinking clearly." I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest. "You weren't thinking clearly? That's your excuse?" I could feel my voice rising, but I didn't care. "You didn't stop for a second to consider how this would destroy me? You, my father, the man who raised me to value trust and honesty, threw it all away for, what? Some connection with my husband? The man I loved?" Tears welled up in his eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw the man who had been my hero, the man I had turned to in times of heartache. But now, that image was shattered. "I've lost everything because of this," he whispered. "I've lost you, and I don't know how to live with that." I sat there, staring at him, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Part of me wanted to forgive him, to comfort him like I used to when I was a little girl and he had all the answers. But the other part of me, the part that had been ripped apart by his betrayal, couldn't let go of the pain. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," I finally said, my voice cold and detached. "What you did, it's something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. And as much as I wish things could go back to the way they were, they can't." He nodded, wiping the tears from his face. "I understand," he whispered. "I'll give you all the time you need." The conversation ended with no real resolution, just a deep, painful silence. As I left the cafe, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, but it was replaced by a profound sadness. I knew I had taken the first step toward healing, but the road ahead was long and uncertain. In the weeks that followed, I began to focus more on myself. I went back to therapy, something I had neglected in the whirlwind of emotions. My therapist helped me navigate the complex feelings of betrayal, loss, and the slow process of rebuilding trust, if not in others, at least in myself. One evening, while sitting on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sunset over the city, I received a text from Peter. It was brief, but heartfelt. "Louise, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm sorry, truly, for everything. I hope you find peace, and I'll always remember the love we shared. Take care." I stared at the message for what felt like hours, my heart aching for the life we had built and lost. But I didn't reply. Some things were better left in the past. Months turned into a year, and though the wounds were still there, they had begun to heal. Slowly, I found new joys in life, my work, my friends, and the little moments that reminded me I was still capable of happiness. I started writing more, pouring my emotions into stories that reflected the pain and the strength I had found in myself. It was cathartic, and in a strange way, it brought me back to the girl who had once fallen in love with literature and its power to heal. As for my father, our relationship remained distant. We spoke occasionally, mostly brief, superficial conversations. I wasn't ready for more, and I didn't know if I ever would be, but I had made peace with that. Some scars never fully fade, and that was okay. In the end, I learned that healing is a journey, not a destination. And though I had been betrayed by the two people I trusted most, I had also discovered a new strength within myself, one that I didn't know existed until I was forced to confront it. And that, perhaps, was the most important lesson of all. As time moved forward, the days became more manageable, though the weight of what had happened lingered in the corners of my mind. I focused on rebuilding my life, one piece at a time. Therapy became a lifeline, helping me untangle the knots of betrayal and loss. The pain had dulled, but it was still there, a reminder of everything I had lost. I started pouring more energy into my teaching. My students, without knowing it, became my greatest distraction, their youthful curiosity and innocence a balm for my wounded soul. I found solace in sharing the stories of classic literature, tales of love, betrayal, and redemption that now felt so personal. Every now and then, a line from a novel would hit me in the gut, resonating in ways I never imagined. One day, during a particularly quiet afternoon at school, I received a message from an old college friend, Sarah. We hadn't spoken in years, but she had heard about what happened through mutual acquaintances. "Hey, Louise, I've been thinking about you. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I'm here if you need anything." Her kindness caught me off guard. I hadn't told many people about the full extent of the betrayal. Most only knew Peter and I had separated, not the devastating details about my father. For the first time in months, I felt the urge to reach out. Maybe it was time to let someone else into my world, to share the burden. I replied, "Thanks, Sarah. It's been rough, but I'm getting through it. Let's catch up sometime." We made plans for coffee, and as the day of our meeting approached, I found myself both excited and nervous. Sharing my story with someone outside my immediate circle felt like opening a door I had kept tightly shut. When we met at the cafe, Sarah greeted me with a warm hug. She looked the same as she had in college, kind eyes, a gentle smile. We ordered our drinks and found a quiet corner to sit. After the small talk faded, Sarah gently asked, "So, how are you? I mean, really?" I took a deep breath, unsure of where to begin. "It's been a lot," I admitted. "I'm still trying to figure out how to process everything." Sarah listened as I told her the whole story. About Peter, about my father, and the devastating betrayal that had torn my world apart. She didn't interrupt or try to offer advice, just let me speak, and that alone was a comfort I hadn't realized I needed. When I finished, Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I can't imagine how hard this must have been for you," she said, "but I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so proud of how you're handling it. You're stronger than you realize." Her words were like a breath of fresh air. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not as the victim of someone else's choices, but as a person who had survived something unimaginable. We spent hours talking that afternoon, and by the time we parted ways, I felt lighter. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was a step toward healing that I hadn't expected. As the months rolled on, I found myself opening up more, reconnecting with old friends, and slowly rebuilding a support network I hadn't realized I needed. Life wasn't perfect, but it was better, and that was enough for now. One evening, I received an email from my father. I hadn't spoken to him much since our conversation at the cafe. The email was brief, but it stirred something deep within me. "Louise, I know you don't want to hear from me, and I completely understand. I just wanted to let you know that I'm thinking about you every day. I miss you. I know I've hurt you in a way I can never take back. But if there's ever a chance to rebuild even a small part of what we had, I'm here, always. Love, Dad." I stared at the email for a long time. My emotions were conflicted. I had told him I didn't want to see him again, but now, months later, the sting of the betrayal wasn't as sharp. I still felt the hurt, but I also felt the weight of time, the slow realization that holding on to anger was only hurting me more. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat with the emotions, letting them swirl and settle. That night, I dreamed of my childhood, of the moments when my dad had been my hero, the man who had held me when I cried, taught me how to ride a bike, and helped me navigate the world after my mum passed. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else, from another lifetime. The next morning, I wrote back, "Dad, I'm not ready to see you yet, but I appreciate the message. I'm working on healing and I know you are too. Maybe one day we can talk again. Until then, take care." It wasn't much, but it was a start. I wasn't sure if I would ever truly forgive him, but I was starting to realize that forgiveness wasn't just for him, it was for me too. I needed to let go of the weight of the past if I ever wanted to move forward. In the months that followed, I focused more on my own journey. I began taking yoga classes, meditating, and even started a personal blog where I shared my experiences with others who had gone through similar betrayals. The more I wrote, the more I realized that my story wasn't just about pain. It was about resilience, about finding strength in the darkest of times. One afternoon, while writing a new blog post, I received a notification from my YouTube channel. A comment had come through on my latest video, and as I clicked to read it, my heart warmed at the words, "Thank you for sharing your story. You don't know how much it has helped me. I'm going through something similar, and your courage gives me hope." In that moment, I realized that by sharing my story, I wasn't just healing myself. I was helping others find their own path to healing as well. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest redemption of all. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was stronger than I had ever been before. And that was enough. For now, that was enough. So, how do you find strength after a betrayal? Share your stories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of resilience, heartbreak, and healing. Thank you for being here, and remember, you are never alone in your journey. As I continued to rebuild my life, a sense of peace began to settle over me. The heartbreak, though still present, no longer defined me. I was starting to reclaim my own story, no longer just the woman betrayed by her husband and father, but someone who had overcome unimaginable pain and was moving forward with purpose. The blog I started had unexpectedly grown into a small community of readers who shared their own stories of betrayal and healing. It became a space where we could all connect, support one another, and find strength in our shared experiences. Every time I read a comment from someone who felt inspired or comforted by my words, I felt a little lighter, a little more empowered. One day, as I scrolled through my comments, I noticed a message from someone who had been following my posts closely. Her name was Emily, and her story mirrored mine in ways that were both heartbreaking and eerily familiar. She wrote about discovering her husband's affair with someone close to her, someone she had trusted completely. She had stumbled across my blog at a time when she was feeling lost and alone, and she thanked me for giving her hope when she thought she had none. Her words touched me deeply, reminding me of how interconnected we all are, even in our darkest moments. I decided to reach out to her directly. What started as a simple exchange of supportive messages quickly grew into a friendship. Emily and I would chat for hours, discussing everything from our shared pain to our dreams for the future. She lived in a different state, but it felt like we had known each other for years. Through our conversations, I realized how much I had grown. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. The betrayal no longer consumed me the way it once had. I had taken back control of my life, and though there were still difficult days, I no longer felt like a victim of my circumstances. But there was still one loose thread in my life that needed addressing: my father. Though I had responded to his email months earlier, we hadn't spoken since. The distance between us remained, and I knew that eventually I would have to confront him again. I needed to find closure, not for his sake, but for my own. One afternoon, I decided it was time. I called him and asked if we could meet. He sounded both surprised and relieved, and we agreed to meet at the same cafe where we had spoken before. As I walked toward the familiar place, my heart raced with anticipation. This time, however, I felt more in control. I wasn't the broken daughter seeking answers. I was a woman who had come to terms with what had happened and was ready to move forward. When I arrived, my father was already there, just as he had been months before. He stood when he saw me, his expression filled with hope and trepidation. We sat down, and for a few moments, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't as heavy as it had been the first time. Instead, It felt like a calm before an inevitable, but necessary, conversation. "I wasn't sure you'd ever want to see me again," he said, his voice tentative. "I wasn't sure either," I admitted. "But I've had a lot of time to think. I've come to realize that holding on to the anger, the hurt, it's only hurting me. I don't want to live like that anymore." He nodded, his eyes downcast. "I never wanted to hurt you, Louise. I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I want you to know that I've thought about this every day. I've missed you so much." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. "Dad, I've been through a lot because of what you and Peter did. I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you, but I've realized that forgiveness isn't always about absolving someone of their wrongdoing. Sometimes it's about letting go for yourself." He looked at me, his eyes filled with sadness and hope. "I'll take whatever you're willing to give me. I just want a chance to be in your life again, in whatever way you'll allow." I paused, letting his words sink in. Could I let him back into my life? I wasn't sure, but I knew that I didn't want to carry the weight of this pain forever. "I'm not ready to go back to how things were," I said, my voice steady. "But maybe with time we can rebuild something. It won't be the same, but I think we can try." Tears welled up in his eyes and he nodded, unable to speak. I could see the remorse and the longing in his face, and, though it didn't erase the past, it gave me a small sense of peace to know he was trying. We talked for a while longer, about nothing in particular, just the small details of life that we had missed in each other's absence. As I left the cafe, I felt lighter, as if a burden I had carried for far too long had finally begun to lift. The road ahead with my father would be uncertain, but at least we were moving forward. Over the next few months, I continued to nurture the friendships and connections I had built, including my friendship with Emily. She came to visit one weekend, and we spent hours walking through the city, talking about our pasts, our dreams, and the future we were both working toward. Having someone who truly understood what I had been through made all the difference. It was a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we are never truly alone. Eventually, I began to date again. At first, it felt strange, almost like stepping into a new world after so much heartbreak. But I took it slow, allowing myself the time and space I needed to heal further. I wasn't rushing into anything. I had learned that love was something that needed to be built on trust, mutual respect, and understanding. There were days when the memories of Peter and my father still haunted me, but they were fewer and farther between. With each passing day, I grew stronger, more confident in who I was and what I wanted from life. I had rebuilt myself, not as the woman who had been betrayed, but as someone who had found her own strength and resilience in the face of unimaginable pain. One night, as I sat on my balcony, looking out at the city lights, I realized something profound. My story, though marked by betrayal and heartbreak, was also a story of survival, of growth, and of finding my way back to myself. And that, more than anything, was the legacy I wanted to carry with me. I picked up my phone and recorded a new video for my channel, my heart full of hope and gratitude. Healing isn't a straight line, it's messy, and it takes time. But if you keep moving forward, you'll find that you're stronger than you ever imagined. Thank you for being with me on this journey. Remember, you're never alone. And so, to all of you listening, what lessons have you learned from your own stories of heartbreak? Share in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of love, loss, and everything in between. Together, we heal.